Hello, it's great to be with you here today. I grew up in outback Queensland, still today the most homophobic place in Australia, and in my early 20s I moved to Tasmania, which is the second most homophobic place in Australia, so it's a lovely step forward for me. It's all relative, isn't it? So I grew up in Boulia, which is 200 miles from Mount Isa, yeah, very isolating kind of area for somebody coming to terms with their sexuality and gender identities. So from the age of about 3, I knew that I was, or I felt like I was really a boy in a girl's body, and it was really confusing. And I think little children know from a young age if they're in the wrong body, or as well. And I find that lots of transgender and gender diverse people have felt that way from that very young age, and and so I. Sort of, when I talked about that with my family and my friends, they laughed at me and ridiculed me, and just told me I was stupid, and I learned to hide it, and and I learned to be ashamed of it, really, and thought maybe I come from Mars, why am I so different to everybody else, and a really isolating experience. So mum dressed me up as a girl, wanted, she had the boy and the girl, and they wanted, that happy little boy and girl family. And, I just, didn't want to dress in, the dresses and the pink dress. Pink, she loved pink, and I didn't. So, didn't want to dress in those kind of pink dresses and all of that. So really, trying times for a child. As I grew up and came to terms, with my sexuality, I realised that I was attracted to girls. And, some of us come to terms with our sexuality as young as 8. For me, I was 16. But, I know a lot of other, and these days people are coming to terms with their sexuality, somewhere between 8 and 12 or 13 probably, and finding attraction to whoever they're attracted to, really. I believe that we're born that way. We're attracted, either attracted to girls, boys, or more, girls and boys. So and then of course we've got to recognise we've got people that are gender diverse. So attracted to the soul, or attracted to the person, rather than just attracted to males or females. Which is now, of course, the new word is, of course, pansexual, meaning bi meaning two and pan meaning more than two. So and for someone like me who now identifies as gender diverse myself, I think that that pansexual is great. For people that are attracted to the soul. But so when it made some sense to me that I when I was attracted to girls in Boulia, but it certainly didn't make sense to those girls in Boulia. So so more confusion. And, I think that the things that we hear when we're growing up, and all that sort of homophobic comments and the homophobic jokes and all of those things, and we hear that as children. So, I often say, be careful what you say, because somewhere a child is listening, and they're taking all that in. So, I heard, outback Queensland, we didn't, there was no real live lesbians out there, so I couldn't say maybe I'm a lesbian. It was really kind of confusing, and transgender was not something that I'd ever heard of. So, it was, it wasn't, and the services weren't there for support. We were, they're tough in outback Queensland. It's take in my day, I'm 55 this year, so, in my day it was take a bucket of cement and just bloody toughen up, really. So it was a pretty tough country, and people didn't go to counsellors and didn't seek that support, which I see such value in now myself, and think how much easier everyone's life might have been if we had support. And I think we've got to remember that families, like my family, had no idea how to to deal with a gender diverse young person, and certainly they had they think that still today think that lesbian and gays and bisexual people are perverts, which we know that's not true, but that's their opinion. And my father's in his 80s now, and probably one of the most homophobic people on earth, but and he'll never change. So although we're learning that people are born that way, and they and we're getting more understanding around that, some people are still stuck in the dark ages, unfortunately. So it's a bit of a lucky dip which family you're born into. And, I love to see the young children these days that, are supported in their families, and I think, I would have loved parents like that just let me be and dress how I wanted to dress and be myself and come to terms with my gender identity and my sexuality without criticism and without, trampling down on me. And I come from family violence as well. So, I think I used to think it was because I was different that I was abused, but realised, of course, there's no excuse for abuse anyway. And, and there's no excuse for that family violence. But, that compounded all of the issues that I was dealing with. So, I think that, I look at some of the young people these days and, the parents are saying, oh, yeah, well, my child is, hasn't decided whether they're a girl or a boy yet, and we just let them be. And, and I think that's what's right and that's what's natural and that's the way it should be. Because I think that, every one of us are a unique individual human being, and we really need to be true to who we are. And that's the only place for happiness, and it's the only place for healthy, happy children, is just letting them be themselves and, supported to come to terms. It's a real journey, coming to terms with your sexuality and your gender identity. And, when we're talking about gender identity, we're talking about that, from the age of 3 mostly. They're coming to terms with their gender identity, and they just need to be supported to deal with that. My own, journey, I didn't... I was in my 20s when when I heard about transgender, and I looked to transition, to male, and then decided that, that actually that didn't suit me either, and I was probably have an undiagnosed intersex condition. So, so when I went on testosterone didn't work for me. And I went, well, actually, I'm just going to stay in the body that I was born in, and I'm going to, I'm not going to change my body to suit society, but I'm going to change society to suit me. And that led me to education, because I think that changing society to suit, the people that live in it is really about education. I still believe that people aren't ignorant and, and homophobic, and that if they're educated around the subject. I think that sort of homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and all of those phobias simply come from a lack of understanding. And I think one of the strengths of lived experience is that when you hear people tell their stories, you can understand how it, helps you to understand how it really is for them. So, throughout the education work that I've done later in life, it's been about using lived experience as that tool for change. So we can talk about stats and all of that, but at the end of the day, do we remember them? I mean, I've been to suicide prevention conferences where I see these stats and I think they're terrible, but, in a week, a month, a year, do I remember those stats? No, I don't. But I do remember the stories of the speakers that stood up there and talked about stuff. And, I think that's, one of the benefits. So, yeah, my journey, as I left home at the age of 15 to escape from my family violence. And, it was pretty tough. You think that you're growing up and whatever, so it was pretty tough out there on the street as well. Although, I wasn't on the street as such, because I did rent with some friends of mine, so that was a bit easier. But, I was still struggling coming to terms with my gender identity and my sexuality, and people think, and quite often say, well, you're just a lesbian. And I think that, that's where labelling is not great. I needed to come to terms with who I was. I didn't feel like a lesbian. I really felt like a male in a female body. And, that was my struggle. And I think that, we need to let people label themselves, and children, and people label themselves. And, if they say, that they're, we have children now that'll say sometimes they're a girl today, and and tomorrow they're a boy, and they're still coming to terms with that. And I think that that respectful parents or respectful carers would say, who are you today, and sometimes they'll say I'm they're a male name, and sometimes they'll say they're a female name, and just let them be, to come to terms with who they are and that as well. So yeah, so I once I come to terms with it all by myself, and I went to psychiatrists and that, and all the psychiatrists said, how did you work this out by yourself, Sharon? And I went, well, who else was going to help me, because I didn't understand that there were services out there to help, and there probably wasn't in Bulia, but when I moved certainly to Tasmania, there were services, and I linked into the Gender Centre in Melbourne, and worked with them for some time when I looked at transition, and and of course in Tasmania we have Working It Out, which is specifically for people coming to terms with their sexuality and gender identity. So once I worked all this out for myself, I kind of went, I want to help others so that they don't have that struggle, because the whole early intervention and support to work through this stuff is so important for young people. And so here we're lucky to have Working It Out across Australia. We have other services to support people to coming to terms with their sexuality and gender identities. But so I went on then to work for 6 years as an educated counsellor for Working It Out, because I wanted to be one of those people that was out there, and I actually wanted to do the counselling. Counselling was really the bit that I wanted to do, and but I found that the education was far more powerful. And I think that I like to change the world one person at a time, and when you're doing education, you can do it on a larger scale. And so it's really the education work that I love. And years later, I went on. I'm now the executive officer for Kentish Regional Clinic, and we operate our head office is here in Sheffield in Tasmania. And I'm a rural and regional person, and I've not one of those people. People often said you'll have to move to Sydney, or you'll have to move to Melbourne, or you can't live like this in rural and regional areas. Well, yes, I can, because we need to claim these spaces, and I'm not moving to the city, because society doesn't want me in the country. And I think that, when we do stay in these rural and regional communities is when we see real change, because people work out, that I'm just a normal human being trying to, whatever normal is, or, just being myself, and they realise that you're not so scary. And I moved to Mole Creek, in my early 20s, and people used to cross the other side of the road because they didn't want to be on the same side of the street in case they caught what you had. And it was just crazy, really. And but change, once people get to know you and you're part of the community, then that's where real change comes. So we need to be living in our communities and being out and proud, and claiming those spaces. But I think that now here at Kentish Regional Clinic, when I came here, we do a few programs, but we added to our programs the LGBTIQA plus professional development, because and which we now do across the state. We've done our training in Melbourne as well, and we also have done some work in Queensland, because Kentish Regional Clinic have an office in Queensland as well. So so I think that it's about getting that education out, so all services and community members as well, people can come along to our training that have a transgender young person, or or they're trying to understand some either young person's bisexuality, then they can come along to training, because I think that training is a really powerful tool for change and understanding. And I think that parents do need support, and and parents and carers do often need support as well with coming to terms with their child's sexuality or gender identity, and really important. I often think if my parents would have or could have got support, whether that would have changed our entire lives. I have very little contact with my family, although interestingly enough there's two in our family, and my brother's gay, but he didn't come to terms with his sexuality till he was 30, and yet he was, as a young child, I could see us that that wanted to see. Mum and Dad never saw because they never wanted to, but you could tell he was gay from a very young age. He was very sort of feminine, and I'm not saying that every gay boy is, but he was, and some are and some aren't really, but he was always that sort of feminine kind of boy. And but I think it was the homophobia and that sort of thing, and the way that I was treated within my family, that made it impossible for him, in his own mind, to come out to my parents. And he's invited people in, but will never tell my parents that, or our parents that, that he's gay. And and I often think, be careful how we treat one sibling, because often there are other siblings within that family that might be gay or gender diverse as well, and then they see the way one child is treated and they go, I'm never going down that track, so that, which is what my brother's done. He's 50, he's older than me even, but he'll never come out to our family. And which means that, and you might think that coming out's not such a big deal, but if we can't be open about who we are, we have to guard every word we say, and we have to be careful, or we can't bring our partners home, and there's all that sort of stuff that goes on. So I think that it's really important for people to be out if they want to be. There's some, communities and of different cultures where they can't be out, and, so they just invite people in and all of that. But I think that, Yeah, I think we all, need to be educated around this subject and understand that people don't wake up one day and go, life is a bit difficult and today I'll just choose to be gay. So, a really important aspect. So, I just want to go through some do's and don'ts when we're dealing with LGBTIQA plus people. So one of the things is, don't make assumptions about people. If they like girls, don't assume that they're a lesbian. They might be bisexual or pansexual. So and don't label children. Let them choose their own labels. If they kind of go, I like girls and boys, and and you say, oh, are you bisexual? And well, they might not identify as bisexual. We don't. Some people don't like being labelled, so don't label them. Let them choose their own labels and let them find their own way. Don't ask overly personal questions. In the context of how you're dealing with that child, obviously. But yeah. And don't judge relationships. If the little girl comes home and says, I've got a girlfriend, and don't sort of judge the relationships between people. It's really important to let them just be themselves. Don't dismiss or erase children's identities. Sometimes you'll have a boy come home and say, I like boys, and parents will say, well, how would you know? You haven't had a boyfriend. You wouldn't know whether you like boys or not. Well, when we're coming to terms with our sexuality, we know at a certain age whether we're attracted to girls, boys, or or more than girls and boys. People do know, even children, and sometimes we don't give children the rights that they should have around some of that stuff. So do allow children to define themselves. Let them find their own way in life. That can take time, and they really need support, just to work their way through that. And do normalise, assist with self-acceptance. That's really important. It's, knowing that there's other people out there just like them is really important to them. Do ask appropriate questions. It's really important that we ask appropriate questions, and do take concerns seriously. It's really important to take those concerns seriously, and do support LGBTIQA plus diversity. I'd love you all to come away to be LGBTIQA plus advocates and allies. It's really important. And we need to remember that LGBTIQA people are a high risk of anxiety, depression, and suicide. And, there's nothing about them, there's nothing about us that makes us a higher suicide risk group except the society we live in. So if we change that society, then we change the risk, for these young people. So, and really important. So I think that if we can all go out there and learn a little bit more about LGBTI people, be allies, and change the world we live in, that'll be better for these people. Thank you for your time, and great to be here with you today. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks so much, Sharon, for a wonderful presentation. We do have Sharon here, and we'll just get her to start her video and give her some audio before we get going. Oh, there she is. Hi, Sharon.
G'day. Nice to be here.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much. We did have some technical issues earlier, so I might just get everyone to raise their hand again, if possible, to make sure that everyone can hear. If we can just do the raise hand. Yes, excellent, thank you. I was just saying earlier that at the Golden Globes, they had issues with people being on mute, so I think we're going okay. So we'll get into some questions and answers if that's okay. First question that I had, there's quite a few questions, which is really good. The first question that I had was, I was wondering if you had any, the question is, if you had any suggestions for those working with children, whether it be in schools or childcare or community settings, in how to set up inclusive spaces, so that to increase, the acceptance and for people to feel welcome.
Yeah, I think that I go into places now, and I went to Headspace the other day, for instance, and they had the rainbow flags and different flags on the front counter and on the front door as well. So, anything that makes people feel like it's inclusive around your flags and posters and stuff like that as well is really useful. Yeah.
And do you have any suggestions, and I'm not sure if we could put something out to people later on about, is there children's books and things like that that you think are useful?
I think the LGBTI Health Alliance website is one of the best places to go for some of that stuff. And then there's the Rainbow Families as well. So you can actually get into Rainbow Families. LGBTI Health Alliance and Rainbow Families are two good places to get that sort of information and keep up to date with it as well.
Yeah, we had a question from one of the attendees. Do you have any insight on the current LGBTIQA plus and conversion therapy?
Yes, conversion therapy. I can't believe we're in 2021 and we're still talking about conversion therapy. It was so fantastic to see Victoria. Now it's a criminal offence to do conversion therapy, and we know, and we've known for so many years that that it doesn't work. That people are born that way. You can't change them, and and the trauma that people experience through gay conversion therapy or conversion therapy is horrendous. It's the scars that they'll carry, for the rest of their lives. And, this whole debate has brought all that up for people again. So, it's really important that we know that people are born the way they are and that we support them to come to terms with who they are in their own time and their own space. So, yeah, when we can say, gay, and, some of the ministers and that are saying, it's you're going to make us criminals. Well, you were already criminals in my mind and most people's mind in terms of the, the trauma that it creates for these people. And it's internalizing, internalized homophobia is a terrible thing, and and that helps to to increase the risk of that internalized homophobia for people's lives. So it's we need to get, it needs to be banned and criminalized and and stopped.
Yeah. So is there changes in legislation in Tasmania to make that happen, or in the Victoria?
I think that they're looking at it right across nationally. I think there's a fair bit of pressure to make it criminal right across the nation. So I know we put in some submissions. The Kentish Regional Clinic put in a submission. I put in a submission as well through another through another group that I'm involved in. One of our board members was subjected to it, gay conversion therapy, and just so traumatic for him. It's hopefully we'll see it ban, a criminal offence by the end of this year in all states, but some states are slow to follow. Hopefully, yes, it needs to be banned and criminalised.
Thanks, Sharon. The next question we had is that it's such a useful and powerful way to hear your talk, the binaries of gender and sex being opened up as diverse and nuanced from lived experience. How can we support school communities to empower and make room for gender and sexually diverse young people?
Yeah, I think the Safe Schools Coalition were on the right track, and that got, we need education in schools and for teachers and that as well from a young age, age appropriate stuff. But, we should have education in schools, and certainly, they should be inclusive, because we're still finding that, I haven't got to see the Writing Themselves In report has just been released recently, and I'd be really interested to see that. And I haven't got to read that yet, but, I'm sure that there's still lots of bullying and, lots of stuff going on in schools. And I've heard, students say it's the teachers sometimes that do the bullying, of LGBTI students. And, this happens because of lack of education. So, all of those teachers and all those students really need to be educated, age appropriately around these subjects. I think the Safe Schools Coalition was on the right track, and it's a shame that we lost that. But, slow to get these things into schools. When you talk about LGBTI stuff, they think, young people, if we talk about it, they'll try it. Well, that's not true. We know they make informed decisions. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
And schools are a really important place,
Yeah.
for young people. So that's one of the things I'd love to see training in all schools.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've got the next question on the screen. Someone's asked, they've said, I'm autistic and struggle with knowing what questions are appropriate or inappropriate to ask. My teenager has come out as gender fluid and I'm having trouble relating because I'm not sure what I'm allowed to ask and not ask. Is there a safe place where I can ask questions without fear of causing inadvertent offence? I want to understand my child better.
There's a lot of different information from PFLAG, and PFLAG Queensland's really got some good information around that. But I think if you come from a place of love and care, and then it'll be helpful as well. But if you want information, from which I say PFLAG, like we roll these acronyms, so it's Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays. So, and it does include, we always said lesbian, gays, but it's, LGBTI. So, they have some really good information around how to do that appropriately.
Yeah, great. I did have another one here. I guess it's, it can be difficult for parents when their child grows up and has a different identity to them, particularly when that identity might be vastly different to and challenges their ideas about how they see the world. So the question is, how can workers and community members best help to increase the understanding and acceptance of that child? Is there, information and support, which I think you've kind of gone into just there with the PFLAG. Is there certain informational support that you think is really helpful for parents?
Yes, getting parents to have, to be educated around this subject is important, but, some of them won't engage in that. And I can see so many, my own parents and my wife's parents, that could, benefit from talking to somebody or getting some education, but they refuse. So it's the ones that don't refuse, I guess, that we can work with. And like PFLAG has really good information from them. And, I think one of the important things we need to let our children know, or our family know if they come out, is that, that we still love them. I think that's a really important thing because, lots of LGBTI people are so afraid that we will lose that. So, when young people come out, that they'll lose that love and support. And if we can just ensure them that we still love them. And I had a beautiful case where someone told me, a father actually told me that when his daughter came out as a lesbian, he said, Sharon, I thought I've got 30 seconds to make this right. And he said, I love you as much now as I loved you 30 seconds ago, and that will never change. It was just so beautiful, brought tears to my eyes. And he said, I had to go away and question a lot of what I'd been taught and revisit a lot of what I thought I knew. And I had a lot of soul searching to do. And this man, in fact, was a minister. So, but he said, I knew I had 30 seconds to make this right, Sharon, and I did it. And I just thought that was beautiful. That's perfect. Because sometimes we do have to go away. We have these ideas of what a gay or a lesbian is, or what, a bisexual person is. And we have all these stereotypes and all this other stuff. And, often it doesn't measure up in real life. It's, so we really do have to go away and get educated and listen and, talk openly if we can about some of those, help me to understand this, to our children, or that in, as well. So.
Sorry, I've got another couple of questions, but I need to turn my head to read them on the screen. So apologies for looking away. Everyone. So we've got a question that says, I work in disability residential services. We often face supporting clients who identify as gender diverse and how to create their own identity. This is challenging when it is in opposition to their person responsible or parent or guardian who strongly holds traditional gender views. Any advice on how to support the more traditional views when it can be so impactful to someone?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it, when you're working in that sort of a situation? And I guess, you'll have your own policies and procedures around some of that stuff. But often, what's right for the young person is not, backed up, supported by the parents. And, and then sometimes there's one parent that supports them and one parent that doesn't. And it gets really messy. So, wherever you can, I think ensuring that you do your best and even helping perhaps the parents to have some information and some education around that. I think it all comes back to education and information. So, if workers can encourage parents, which can be difficult as well, but if you can, encourage and sort of normalize it and say, there's, 10 or however 10%, at least 10% of the population out there that are LGBTI, maybe even 20 really, you're probably looking at 20% of the population. So it's not, it's not uncommon. It's just, it's just a matter of them understanding and, and that's about education. But whether, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, eh? So it just depends, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a tough one sometimes, for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah, I think there's a number of questions around if parents are unsupportive and how to support that child or that person. We did have another question about how do organisations become LGBTIQA plus allies?
Yeah, I think I think making sure your services are educated, so that you have education, and letting people know that you are as well. So whether you've got rainbow stickers on your door or that, there is the rainbow tick. People can get the rainbow tick, which probably in some states is probably cheaper than others, but it's an accreditation process as well. But making sure that all your staff are educated, that people are safe there, and then looking at your if I go into a service and they have male and female, immediately I know I'm not recognised here, so that'll just I'll switch off. So if I go in there, there's a sticker on the door, or there's a flyer up, or there's something that lets me know, then I know that I'm safe, and that can make a difference for people if they're wanting to come out to a service. It can, the quicker they can come out to a service, the quicker they can relax and talk and engage with that service. So, it's making sure that that you're advertising that you're LGBTI inclusive.
Awesome. So another question here. So I know in the video that you mentioned that it's important not to label, as some kids might be working out who they are and don't want to have a label attached to them.
Yes.
And I know for myself that sometimes a label can be empowering. It's empowering to know that there is this thing, or the community that is the same as you. Do you think it's important to have these sorts of conversations without boxing kids in, to let them know about, the community?
Yes, that's a really good point, because as I say, people need to choose their labels. But for me, when I found that transgender, that was a label that I'm transgender, and there's more people out there like me, and that label is really important for me to define myself and understand myself, even if I choose to change it later on. I think that that for lots of people, having a label is important, but also important that they choose the labels. So you can kind of go, well, here's these labels. You could be bisexual or pansexual, or you could be transgender, or and let people choose their own labels, but not when I say don't label, don't say, well, you sleep with men and women, so obviously you're bisexual. Well, some men sleep with men and don't identify as bisexual, and we have a right to choose our labels. And I remember when I identified once as a transgender lesbian, well, I was told in no uncertain terms from an organisation that I wasn't a real transgender lesbian, because I was female to male and not male to female, and a proper transgender lesbian was, and I was like, yeah, right. But actually, you don't tell me what label, I can choose my own identity. So it is, it's a very good point. I think that, having those conversations and people being able to choose their own labels is really empowering often for someone to have a label and kind of go, I fit, especially if you felt like you haven't, but not to force that. For me, that's again, forcing people to have labels is the problem.
No worries. I think we've just got one final question, or a statement really, around the statistics around mental health and how much that impacts, I guess, the lack of understanding around the LGBTIQA plus community, that it's people sort of believe that it's a causation rather than the fact that the lack of support in the community. How important do you think it is for people to understand the difference here?
Yeah, really important. Yes, it is really important for people to understand. And, and that does come back to education, doesn't it, really? So, we need to be educating communities, and we need to be educating workplaces, and everyone needs to be educated around the subject, because, any ignorance only comes from lack of knowledge. And homophobia, biphobia, transphobia is a fear of what we don't know, really. That's what it is. So it's really important that, that people are educated around the subject. And some people that have grown up with a family member, they're the people that understand, and they go, oh yeah, my uncle was like that, and that he was gay, and there's, no big deal, and he's a great bloke, so so people knowing someone is better. And I think that's like, with bisexuals, for instance, there wasn't so many out bisexual people, so it was hard for people to find someone that they could identify with. And I think that's really important, to see other people like yourself, to kind of accept in terms of self-acceptance. And asexual is the new one now. Well, it's not new at all, but the fact is that there are more out asexual people than there ever has been, and people come to forums and that and go, I'm asexual. That didn't happen years ago. Very rarely did anyone actually come out as asexual. So, the more open and services and spaces and everything is, then the more and families and communities are, then the more able people are able to come out.
Well, so thank you very much. It's been really wonderful to talk to you today. And I think we got to everyone's questions, or most people's questions. So thanks to everyone else for taking part in the workshop, but we have run out of time, and our next presenter is ready and waiting. So if you have enjoyed this workshop and wanted to continue the conversation, of course, you can head over to Slack and find the channel to keep chatting. So thank you so much, Sharon, the Executive Officer of the Kentish Regional Clinic. The wealth of personal experience you bring to your storytelling is always incredibly engaging and always stays with me into the future. So I'm sure everyone has got a lot out of your presentation today.